Hello and welcome to Ag PhD. I'm Darren Hefty.
And I'm Darren Hefty. Thanks for joining us today. We may be in a cornfield, but we're going to talk a little about soybeans and about fungicide use in soybeans, how to get the most bang for your buck and what these fungicides can actually do for your fields.
One of the most popular questions we get on Ag PhD TV and radio is, how do you control grass in different grass crops or in lawns, in pastures? This is not an easy thing when you've got a grass in a grass, but we'll talk about how to do that on today's show.
Well, one other thing that's not always easy is controlling our weed of the week. We'll give you a few ideas of what could help you on your farm later in the show. But first, here's our Farm Basics.
Farm Basics is brought to you by the Liberty Link trait and Liberty herbicide from Bayer. The most reliable weed management solution, Liberty Link and Liberty herbicide are the link to efficient row crop production and sustainable weed management.
During our Farm Basics time today, we're going to talk about how to control a perennial weed with herbicide.
Here's one of the big things I'd like to point out is if you've got a perennial weed, so often I talk to people that just throw their hands up. Oh, it's a perennial, it's got such an extensive root system, I can never really get rid of it. And I say, well, really, what have you tried to do? Well, I've tried pulling it, or I've tried using a hoe, or I've tried doing tillage. And all those methods can work very temporarily. But the big thing about perennials is you have to address that root system underneath the ground. Once you do that, you can actually get rid of many of the perennials.
Well, the other thing too is not all root systems are the same. So for example, Canada thistle has rhizomes below the ground. So in other words, it will spread far and wide. Whereas dandelion has a pretty simple root system, but it's perennial. It can go very deep. Well, those are two different types of root systems, but in either case, they're huge. So a lot of times when you pull the dandelion, yep, you've got that bottom point that's way down in the ground you didn't get. It's going to put another shoot out and dandelion's coming back. With Canada thistle, you say, oh, I'm going to just go do tillage and chop it all up. Okay, well now you've cut those rhizomes off. Now you might have 50 plants where before you just had one great big plant. This is a big problem. So the key here is we talk to people often about if you want to kill a perennial weed, don't do tillage. Leave that root system entirely intact so you can get the herbicide all the way through the plant.
I look at it like pipe work. If you disconnect some water pipes, all of a sudden you get water squirting out all over. But if you leave them all together, you can actually do something that impacts the entire system. The other thing that I really look at with perennial weeds is when is the best time to get things done. Now, some people will say, hey, right now is a great time to get things done because I can actually get out there. I'm done with my corn, with my soybeans, whatever crop that I have to do. Now I've got time to go after those perennials in certain areas. You can do it right now, but when you think about what those roots are doing, they're storing up nutrients and water for the plant. Now a lot of those stores are moving up because the plant's using them. In the fall of the year, a lot of the stores are going down. So the water and nutrients are getting stored up for winter survival. That's a great time to stop these perennial weeds.
You know, I've heard that, Darren, for many years, and people talk about, oh, kill the stuff in the fall, it's way better. I haven't found that in my experience. You can do a great job when the weed is actively growing, and that's the whole key. It depends on where you're at in the country. For example, I look at winter starting in about October. Whereas in the South, they look at winter as starting never or in December or January. What I'm getting at here is as soon as you get cold temperatures, you're not going to move herbicide very well. So we just want to make sure that you have nice warm temperatures. If that happens to be September, if it happens to be August, if it happens to be May or June, I'm fine either way. It's not that big a deal. I don't think it's going to make that much difference. The whole key for me is you got to make sure you have a lethal dose. I think that's where
exactly
most people
right.
go wrong. They
the
just
rate.
don't spray a high enough rate.
Well, so often we talk to people, whether it's on a radio show each week or as we see people out and about, and they say, well, I used this product to try and stop the perennial weed, but it just didn't work for me. How come it works for you and it didn't work for me?
Yep, and the whole key is rate. Now, the other thing about that is water. Very often we find a non-farmer will go to the hardware store and buy a watered down version of the herbicide. Okay, so that's the first problem, and then they put it with way too much water. You want to keep the water volume low, have the spray droplets concentrated, use the strongest labeled dose, and you absolutely can kill perennials as long as your herbicide is systemic, like Roundup is, like Tordon is, like Stinger is. There are a lot of good products out there depending on the perennial weed you've got.
So don't let perennial weeds go. If they're a problem, get after them right away. You can get them under control, control that root system, control that plant with a strong dose.
Well, speaking of perennial weeds, we'll talk about a perennial weed that may be a little out of the ordinary. That's coming up during our Weed of the Week time later in the show.
Increase your productivity with Hypro's dual react control system. The dual nozzle body design allows you to drive at the speed you want while maintaining the rate and droplet size you need. Hypro, helping you spray better.
A farmer's attention to detail is what makes the difference. You take the time for service management because you know how vital it is to your operation. You service your field like everything else, because soil sampling makes all the difference and gets the results you want. Download the app Soil Test Pro and start grid sampling today. Keep your farm growing strong. The more you test, the more you know.
Leading the charge in strip tillage for more than a decade, the Soil Warrior brings the future to your farm today.
One of the biggest yield limiting factors on farms is even crop emergence, and only one closing wheel will get your growing season started right. Furrow Cruiser spiked closing wheels from Copperhead Ag are proven to yield better than standard rubber tire and cast iron closing wheels in all conditions. With yield gains that give you a return on investment the first season, there's no reason to run a standard closing system again. Visit copperheadag.com today to get your 2017 growing season started right.
Let's take a look at our picks for the championship season. We've got 10-34-0.
No. I don't want to talk about them. I want to talk about this Agro Liquid team. Take a look at this lineup. They got it all. The talent, their players can meet any challenge on any field. The coaching staff, the best I've seen.
So that's your pick? No discussions?
Nope. Agro Liquid is the team. They're going all the way to the championship.
When we think about fungicide use, wheat comes to mind and even corn, but soybeans, well, there are a lot of guys that say, soybeans, I don't know if I need to spray a fungicide out there. I don't know what I would use, when I would use it, and what I would be trying to gain. We're going to talk about soybean fungicide use today because it is growing in popularity, especially among higher yielding farmers.
All right, let's talk first about where you absolutely need to use fungicide. That's in the presence of Sclerotinia white mold. Sclerotinia white mold can affect a number of different broadleaf crops. It's maybe not quite as bad in soybeans as it would be in dry beans or sunflowers or some other crops, but still, even in soybeans, we see a fair amount of Sclerotinia white mold in the northern part of the United States each year. If you have this disease, just understand the normal fungicides like Headline and Stratego, all those types of products, they're just not as good on this particular disease. So what you would want to do is you want to start early and spray often. So we often talk about spraying right at flowering, R1, then spray again at R3 first pod, and then it's probably a good idea to at least consider spraying a third time at R5. And I know that seems like overkill, but this is such a bad disease. We've commonly seen yield losses of 10 to 20 bushels, so that would be something that you should consider. The products you could use there would be Endura is great, Proline next best, Domark is by far the cheapest. It's not as good as Endura is going to be, but like I say, it is the least expensive, so it is the most popular.
The other disease that everybody wants to use a fungicide for is sudden death syndrome. Now, it's important to remember a sudden death syndrome. It started much earlier in the season with an infection very early in that plant's life. So there are not a whole lot of options to cure it once it gets going. What we have found some results with has been using Preemptor right at R1. When we think about that plant just as it starts to flower, that's where it has a lot of stress because it's trying to take all its energy and put into making blooms and eventually pods. This is the point in the life of the plant where it's going to start exhibiting some of those symptoms of SDS. If you get the Preemptor out right at R1 and don't be late with it, you can actually delay the onset of SDS and improve your yields and improve the plant health for quite a while into the season.
If you're not looking at a specific disease that's a big problem, all you're really wanting is plant health benefits and some disease control, what we've found in our experience around the country has been that R2, R3 kind of timing, so full flower, first pod, right in there, typically along with an insecticide. That's usually when we see bugs. You can have a very low economic threshold because you're already going to be out there spraying a fungicide, so it doesn't take a lot of bugs is what I'm getting at to justify the $2 insecticide treatment.
There are three primary modes of action that we're using with soybean fungicides. It would be the triazoles, the strobilurins, and also the SDHIs. Now the SDHIs are only in a couple of products that are out on the market that are being commonly used in soybeans, Trivapro and Preaxor, but we're starting to see more SDHIs coming in other crops, and we'll see more in soybeans soon as well. Those products with 3 different sites of action, like at this point Trivapro is our only option in soybeans, well, that does offer some benefit. We've seen some good gains in our research work. We've also seen some good gains with Preaxor that just has 2 different modes of action, but one of those being an SDHI. So I think the important thing here is just use multiple modes of action as we are seeing resistance to the strobilurins in certain parts of the country and with certain diseases.
One of the biggest questions we get about fungicides is, what can I mix them with? Well, we already talked about insecticide. That's a great tank mix partner. You can put fungicide with insecticide. In terms of herbicides, most fungicides can be put with most herbicides. Here again though, check the label, talk to your agronomist, make sure that you aren't doing anything that's going to add excessive leaf burn to your crop. The big key though isn't necessarily tank mixing, it's what are you spraying that with in terms of a nozzle. So are you going to have small droplets or are you going to have big droplets? The whole key, and what I'm getting at here, is with fungicides, they just aren't very mobile in the plant. Now I know you might have heard that, oh, this fungicide or that fungicide is systemic in the plant. No way. None of them are systemic to any degree. Yes, you might see slight leaf movement, but they're not moving all around the plant. What I'm getting at here is coverage is the key. We want smaller droplets, we want more water with a fungicide. All I'm trying to say here is you can get more bang for your buck if you do a better job covering that plant with fungicide. Because if there's a plant part that is not covered, it is probably not protected with that fungicide.
And a good place to start is the Ag PhD Spray Tips Guide. You can download it free on your smartphone or tablet and look up each individual product that you're going to be spraying. It'll give you a good starting point of which tip to use, how much pressure, and how many gallons of water you'll need as well.
One last thing I guess I'd point out is we get the question, how long are these fungicides going to last? Don't count on them lasting all that long. You're only going to protect the plant parts that are out when you spray, number 1. And number 2, I usually tell guys, even with full rates, 1 to 2 weeks worth of residual. Yes, it's possible you might get 3 or 4 weeks, but realistically, most of the time, I'm just going to count on 1 to 2 weeks.
Well, 1 to 2 weeks with a fungicide may be enough, but 1 to 2 weeks of weed control, well, that's not enough to stop our Weed of the Week. We'll show you what will coming up later in the show.
Tired of that old warped poly boom ruining your spray applications? Express Boom from Hypro is a fully assembled stainless steel boom that ensures an even application of chemicals every time. Don't wait another season, upgrade today. Hypro, helping you spray better.
So far, looking behind the machine, I'm thoroughly impressed with them. Compared to the older concaves we were running, we were finding about 40 grains, and we put these new ones in it, and it's hard to find one.
After the break, I found out about these concaves. While we were down, we put these concaves in, and it was like a different machine. I'd say we probably saved 3 to 5 bushels to the acre. I probably tripled my money just by putting these in.
With the success of the Case IH Steiger Quad Track and Magnum Road Track tractors, it's no secret why Case IH is the leader of the track. So it wasn't surprising when the competition started imitating us. But only Case IH offers a 5-axle design to give you a smoother ride, more power to the ground, with less berming and compaction. Still, we're flattered. In fact, if we weren't already red, we'd be blushing.
We love the quality, we love the construction. We're looking forward to working with Morton in the future.
They have this down to a science. They know exactly what you want. They know how to make it happen. It's an easy process.
I would definitely recommend Morton. From the first time I met the salesman to the last nail that the crew put in, it has been a positive and professional experience.
I'm so happy I found Morton because they just make the job so easy.
Find the building of your dreams at mortonbuildings.com.
For lower costs, higher production, Mandico Agri leads with versatility unmatched. Twister is the vertical tillage unit for no-till as well as conventional tillage. Avoid costly downtime with Twister's ease of maintenance. Its unique Coulter suspension allows it to follow the contour of the field yet remain forgiving in rocks. Our hydraulically adjustable Coulter angles mean you never leave the cab, making residue management easier, more efficient. Spring or fall, the Mandico Twister is the new leader. Check with your local dealer or visit mandicoagri.com.
Looking to maximize your yield potential? Monsanto BioAg can help with microbial seed applied solutions. Available for a wide variety of crops, they contain hard-working microbes that help your plants access key nutrients, enhance their root and shoot growth, and help them better withstand stress all season long, all of which add up to a higher yield potential for you. See how microbes can help you at monsantobioag.com/500trillion.
The Quick Belt from Norwood Sales is your all-around grain handling solution. Our conveyor-based system uses an 18-inch belt and a 10-inch tube, which minimizes seed damage while moving more than 10,000 bushels an hour. Keep your grain and your farm moving with the Quick Belt from Norwood Sales.
At least once a month, we get the question on the Ag PhD radio show, hey, how do I kill an annual grass in my pasture? We also get the same type of question about lawns. We get the question of how do I kill grass in a grass crop like corn or wheat? This is not an easy topic because you've got a grass in a grass and you've got to have a herbicide that's so selective, so specific that it's not going to hurt your current grass. How do you do that? Well, there just aren't a lot of choices, but we want to talk about some of those choices today.
It's important as we start this topic to just to remember, when we mention a product here, it may only be labeled for one crop, or it may only be labeled for a couple of crops, and even some that seem like they're pretty close relatives, well, you may not have carryover. Like in lawns, for example, there's a product called Quinclorac. It's marketed as Drive. Does an excellent job controlling crabgrass, some of the annual grasses that pop up in your lawn. Now, it could also be used, that same active ingredient, in another crop like sorghum, for example. In sorghum, that same active ingredient is marketed as Facet. So you see, oh, okay, that active could be used in a couple different places, but guess what? It's not labeled in a grass crop like corn. So you can't just think, well, if I can use it for this weed, I can use it all over. That isn't always the case.
All right, when we talk specifically about pastures, and we get this question in the southern United States quite a bit, like let's take Bermuda grass, for example. Guys will say, hey, I've got something like, let's say, field sandbur. Okay, so I got field sandbur. It's an annual grass. It's in my perennial grass. How do I get rid of it? Well, a couple of options you've got is Pastora, and in addition to that, you certainly could try Plateau. That one's okay. Both of those are just group 2s. They're the ALS chemical family. There's also the pre-emerge option of Prowl, pendimethalin, one of the yellows. Trifluralin is another one that is labeled in some types of grasses. So you don't think about Prowl and Treflan in established grass, but they can be used typically when the grass is dormant in the wintertime. I want to come back to Pastora that I mentioned. That's just a combination of Accent that can be used in corn and Ally that can be used in wheat or pastures. So Accent and Ally combined is Pastora. Yeah, it's not going to be perfect on your field sandbur, but if the sandbur is small, it does actually work pretty well.
Well, the thing to be cautious of there, Brian, is Ally has a long half-life in the soil. So if it's ground that, hey, it's grass this year, but you know what, I'm going to bring it back into row crop production and try and raise cotton or soybeans or something there later on, that's going to be a big watch out for me because, like you say, that Ally could last for multiple years.
Okay, let's just talk real quick about corn and wheat. With corn, we love it when Roundup is out there. We love it when Liberty is out there because now we've got actually good ways to kill grass in corn. Otherwise, you're left with accent, which is not very good unless that grass is really small and actively growing. In wheat, sure, there's been Axial for many years. There has been Everest or some of these other ALS herbicides. But the problem now is we're seeing some ALS resistant grass, some ACCase resistant grass. So then what do you do? Well, there are other products out there now, like Zidua, for example, that's group 15. You can use that early on in the season. It does get to be a real problem, though, if you've only got a couple of choices, and that's what ends up happening quite often when you're trying to be so selective killing a grass in a grass crop.
That may give you a good idea of how to get some grasses under control, but that will not stop our Weed of the Week. We'll show you what will coming up next.
The Weed of the Week is sponsored by the Enlist Weed Control System from Dow AgroSciences, a new herbicide and trait system that will build on glyphosate.
Farming isn't just in the land, it's in you. Take control of weeds like never before. Enlist builds on the Roundup Ready system, combining proven control of a new 2,4-D and glyphosate in Enlist Duo herbicide. Protect what matters without changing the way you farm. Talk to your seed or crop protection supplier today.
Well, today we have a fitting Weed of the Week. During the entire show, we've seen this cotton blowing from cottonwood trees right in front of us. It's probably looked like a snowstorm, and you might say, I know South Dakota's cold, but we shouldn't be having snow in June, right? But the whole thing is, when you've got these trees, what they're trying to do, remember, any plant is trying to reproduce. So there's a lot of this cotton that's blowing around right now at this time of year, and it just got us thinking about how do we kill volunteer trees in our crops.
We have some trees on the edges of some of our fields. Like this field in particular, we've got a buffer maybe 30 or 40 feet and then until we get to trees. Now when you think about trees that are 70 or 80 feet high, oftentimes that root system is going to run 70 or 80 feet out from the tree. So when we're only 30 or 40 feet from the edge, that means we've got some tree roots that are running out into our field.
Well, it's not just the tree roots, it's all the seed that ends up, and that's really what I'm thinking about today with the volunteer trees. The problem is Tordon's by far the best tree killer. Well, that's fine for corn or wheat and what's going to be permanent corn, wheat, or grass. But it's not going to work too well if you're going to try to raise a broadleaf crop. The problem with Tordon that we found is we figure about 1 ounce equals 1 year of carryover. So if you use a quart, that's 32 ounces. Well, that's 32 years. Now, I'm not saying it's probably going to be 32, but I'll bet you it'll be in the range of 10 to 20 years before you can plant a broadleaf crop there again. So Tordon in crop is out. So then you're kind of left with Roundup, 2,4-D, dicamba, those types of products.
And tillage. That's another thing that we see when you have just new little tiny trees coming up. They don't have a big root system under them. You can do a little bit of tillage along the end of the field. Then you don't have to worry about doing any harm to the trees that you do want to keep off to the side.
Well, that's it for our Weed of the Week volunteer trees. But stay tuned, Iron Talk is coming up next.
So far, looking behind the machine, I'm thoroughly impressed with them. Compared to the older concaves we were running, we were finding about 40 grains, and we put these new ones in it, and it's hard to find one.
After the break, I found out about these concaves. While we were down, we put these concaves in, and it was like a different machine. I'd say we probably saved 3 to 5 bushels to the acre. I probably tripled my money just by putting these in.
Dealers, repair shops, and other ag parts resellers, this message is for you. Looking to save money on your parts purchases? Parts Express can help. We have over 3,000 popular items for tractors and combines priced at a level to save you and your customers money. In this tough ag economy, who wouldn't want to save on parts? Parts Express prides itself with old-fashioned service and easy-to-do business with environment. Go to parts-exp.com to see our parts offering and become a Parts Express dealer today.
Introducing the SoilMax ZD48, the newest addition to the SoilMax Gold Digger lineup. The first plow designed for smaller class tractors, the ZD48 has been tested on tractors weighing between 10,000 and 16,000 pounds with excellent results. Designed for row crop farms, vineyards, irrigation, and specialty crop farms. The SoilMax ZD48 will install tile up to 48 inches deep, as well as install 3 or 4-inch tile. The ZD48 truly opens up the world of tile installation to more farms than ever before.
There are micronutrients throughout the league, Joe, but let's take a look at Micro 500.
Yeah, the synergy of the micronutrients in this guy have raised the bar on the field. Those others are just wannabe Micro 500s.
So you think this is the player you'd want on your team?
You bet, whether it's offense, defense, special teams, Micro 500 always has a place on the field.
Okay. You can check out Micro 500 stats at agroliquid.com.
Are you looking for an easy way to apply dry powdered products to your stored grain? Do you want to use the applicator recommended by industry leaders for products like Diacon D and other dry powder products? Changing Time CT applicators successfully apply a diversity of products quickly, easily, and accurately. The innovative CT applicators are designed to give you the most accurate application of products such as talc, inoculants, fertilizers, and other dry products. For commercial use or on the farm, you need the applicator industry leaders are using. CT applicators for the changing times.
Iron Talk is brought to you by Case IH.
The AFS Connect Farm Management System from Case IH connects you, and only you, to the information you need most from your equipment, from anywhere, at any time. AFS Connect, only from Case IH.
Which system provides the best way to side dress nitrogen in corn? We'll talk about that in today's Iron Talk. In terms of nitrogen management, a good place to start is with an online tool like Farmer's Edge Corn Manager to utilize high-frequency satellite data, weather data, crop modeling, and more to estimate how much nitrogen you may need and when to apply it. In addition to that, we also like to ground truth the data, meaning we pull pre-side dress nitrate tests at 12 to 24 inches a week or so ahead of our anticipated side dress applications. Now, if we need more N, then the question is how to apply it. There are more methods of application than we have time to discuss, but here are some that we've tried recently. First, Coulter injection. We have a Heggie sprayer and utilize the nitrogen toolbar attachment to side dress. The benefit is to put the nitrogen in the ground as opposed to leaving it on top. The downside is potentially cutting some roots and that the nitrogen isn't right next to the row. You can sure see the appeal of the Y-drop system. No root pruning, and close placement of the end to the corn. In situations where you don't get much rain, the moisture from the dew is funneled down to the base of the corn plant, effectively moving the nitrogen into the soil. Where it's easy to run into problems, especially with the Coulters and Y-drops, is on the rolly terrain with terraces and point rows. It's tough to stay perfectly between the rows. So what's the best way to side dress? Well, these methods and others can work. It really depends on your field terrain, the rate of N you need to apply, how quickly you'll get some rain, and what you have available for equipment and nitrogen sources as to what you'll utilize on your farm. If you're getting the nitrogen into the plants without losing it, and you're doing it without hurting very many corn plants in each field, you found a system that works well for your farm. That's all for today's Iron Talk, and now, back to the show.
Closed captioning for Ag PhD is sponsored by Norwood Sales.
If you're looking to expand your farm's grain handling, you want everything to be fast and efficient. The Quick Belt from Norwood Sales is your all-around grain handling solution. Our conveyor-based system uses an 18-inch belt and a 10-inch tube, which minimizes seed damage while moving more than 10,000 bushels an hour. That's fast enough to fill a semi in 6 minutes. Plus, our hood is designed to gently direct the flow of grain straight down, keeping your crop in condition. Keep your grain and your farm moving with the Quick Belt from Norwood Sales.
That's all the time we have for today's show, but before we go, we want to invite you to tune in to the Ag PhD radio show. You'll find us on SiriusXM channel 147 at 2 p.m. each weekday.
Don't miss the next Ag PhD TV show. We'll have another Weed of the Week, Iron Talk, Farm Basics, and a whole lot more. I'm Darren Hefty.
And I'm Brian Hefty. Thanks for watching Ag PhD.
A healthy soil helps to keep our air and water clean while providing a medium for productive crops, pastures, and shelter belts. To learn more about how farmers are improving the health of their soils, visit the Responsible Nutrient Management Foundation at rnmf.org.